Hi, Jason. Welcome. Thanks for joining me.
Hi, thanks for having me. I'm excited.
Yes, I am as well. We are in mid-September right now. This is the seventh episode of Data in Sports. It'll be posted in mid-October. So just to give the audience some context of the timing, because today, Thursday, is officially the start of week 3 of the NFL season. And that's very relevant to the topic we'll be talking about today. We both have our Patriots shirts on, our Patriots gear on, as people will learn. And for me, they already know this. If they've listened to prior episodes, for you, they will. We're both born and raised in the Boston area. We both have a love of Boston sports and the Patriots. But today, we're going to be specifically talking about fantasy football, which has a ton of data that's involved, as we'll get into. Before we start and get into your background and go into the topics that we'll cover and finish with behind the data, I wanted to give the audience an idea of like what is the ideal outcome for today's episode so they can have an idea of what we'll be talking about at the start. And so what we're going to end up doing is, of course, we'll cover your background and what you're working on, but we want to help educate and mainly inspire people to show them how your curiosity and interests led you to pursue the projects that we're going to talk about, especially in the context of fantasy football as a core theme. And hopefully, if we do a good job, we can then inspire them to pursue their own interests, even if it's a side project that they start for fun. So does that sound good?
Yeah, that sounds good to me.
All right, sweet. Thanks for that. So let's go a little bit in terms of maybe the beginning. Like where did your interest in sports and data come from?
Yeah, so as you mentioned, we're both Boston born and raised, so that's really where the interest of sports came from. My family's a big sports family, but just, I'm the kid I'm 23 years old. I grew up in Boston. I've seen I don't even know how many championships at this point. It's 6 Patriots, 2 Celtics. I'm not as good as the other ones. I think it's 2 Bruins and 2 Red Sox. So I've been around winning in sports my whole life. I love it. It's what I just love to watch, love to do. So that's where that came from. I also played sports growing up. I was a big basketball and soccer player. So that's where those came from. And then what leads us into today is starting in like 5th grade, I've been in the same fantasy football league with my friends until today. We're going on to week 3 this week. I'm 1-1. I've never won that league. Last year I should have, but I won't get into that. But yeah, it's just I've been around sports my whole life, growing up in the city or around sports always. My family loves sports, so that's really where it came from.
And I'm not that good at math. What season of fantasy football would this be for you then?
I believe this is our 10th year.
Okay,
Or well,
nice.
so the league was it had a couple years before I joined. So if for me it's my 10th year, I think for the league it's like the 13th year or 12th year. So it's long running and there's no end in sight. I mean, we're all still close. We all still talk. We had a live draft this year, so
Oh, that's
good
awesome.
time. Yeah.
Yeah, I have done fantasy sports on and off. And for me, I don't, I guess, have the patience, though my college roommate and best friend is on season 25 of fantasy football. And he said, this is the last one. I want to hit the milestone. So
Yeah.
I don't have the data for this, though I could take it as an action item to then post in the notes, which is that I believe there are macro level stats around the number of Americans that are participating in fantasy football leagues. I've heard of like family leagues where it's just a way, like you said, with your friends, you keep in touch, you talk about things, you're engaged. It's a way for them to have another way to be engaged. And speaking of family, I wanted to mention this too, is that the way we got connected was through your father,
Yeah.
Jeff, who is also a data guy. So I worked with him for quite a few years at a former employer. He's been super helpful for me in my data career then and since. He's a big data guy. And I have a feeling that that's where you got some of this data interest from too. So can you just speak to that a little bit in terms of where your interest in the data component came from? And then if you could, then like lead into your background experience from your studies at both URI and UMass.
Yeah. So my dad jokes with everyone now and says that getting into data and coding was the only thing I've ever listened to him about, and that he's very appreciative of it. But that's not fully true. I listened to him a lot. He coached me for 10 years in soccer, so I had to listen to him for a very long time. But for he's not lying. For as long as I can remember, even when I was a kid and I was like, I'm going to be an NBA player, which I'm not even 6 feet tall. I'm 5'11". Like, I'm not going to be an NBA player. Like, it wasn't happening. But as a kid, you believe that. Even as long as that, he was telling me, like, I want you to start looking at like computer programming and all these things. And so it always kind of stuck in my head. And then I graduated high school and it came time to decide a major for college. And I really had no idea. I was kind of looking at, the basic like business stuff, like a finance or something like that, but I wasn't really interested in it. Then my dad was like, I think you should look at data science, which is at URI, which is where I started. And I was like, all right. So I looked it up and I read it and it sounded cool because, well, I kind of jumped past this, but growing up with sports, I was always interested in statistics. Like, watching the Patriots for so long, every game it felt like it was like, oh, Tom Brady breaks another stat. Hearing stuff like that always just made me like think more about stats and statistics and trends. And so I've kind of been interested in that for a while. So I was like, this sounds interesting. So I looked at it and then, I would do the basic, like people would ask me, where are you going? What are you studying? And I would tell them, and every person I would tell, they would be like, oh my God, like you're going to be set up for life. That's so good. Like you're making a great choice. Here I am today and the job market's in the toilet and I can't find a job.
Yet.
It's
not yet. You can't. I'll reframe that. You can't yet. I'll come back to that in terms of connecting
but
to my experience.
Yeah, I don't regret what I chose. I love it. It's a good time. Just, I don't know. I don't know if I missed anything. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer. But I started at URI with data science and I transferred out and finished at UMass Boston. So
I appreciate that. And we will cover off some of the projects you worked on, some of the things you learned, I guess theoretical, but more practical. And then the core of this episode will be you speaking to those models you've built out. And again, a lot of it's tied to fantasy football. Though I will tell you, so I joined the data industry end of 2012. And early on, I was like, I'm not long for this. So it was B2B data. And my manager at the time was like, you're never leaving. And I said, Scott, I don't know what you're talking about. And then my big boss at the time, Michael, was like, you're never leaving. I was like, I don't get it. I'm still in it, working at another company now, focused on sports, but it's very much a data business. So I've started this platform of data in sports, which has this video podcast component. So I'll also tell you, Jason, if your father hasn't, you're not leaving. And I will say you made the right choice, because we'll touch on this, especially in the, I guess, penultimate topic behind the data. Like, it's not going anywhere. And now with AI, not going anywhere. So you spoke to a little bit of where the interest came from and passion came from, which I appreciate. And I believe for many of us, a lot of these things do come from childhood and then just build over time. And of course, there's parental influence, family influence, the environment that we grew up in. Again, I also grew up here in Boston. I'm not that much older than you, though. I remember opening the paper every morning just to look at box scores, like, okay, what were the stats? And I didn't even know who these players were. This was like, the internet was like newer, right? I was just so curious about how much data was being collected. And it wasn't even advanced stats. It was the air quotes common stats.
Just accounting stats.
Right. Now it's like, I believe in some ways, way over the top. Again, we'll talk about this later. Maybe we'll agree, maybe we won't. Though we have a sense of where your passion came from. So appreciate that background. That will set the scene for us. And at the end, we're gonna finish talking about you too and the behind the data in another context. Though, can you just tell us what you're working on now? Because you mentioned job market not great. I do want to come back or rewind a minute for what I said I would connect the dot on. When I graduated college in 2009, very similar. I was not doing 90% of the stuff that you're doing as like extra work, or what other students these days in college are doing. I was a good student, I'll admit, though I chose the business school path for very specific reasons, right? I'm glad I made that choice too. I believe that the choices we make are done for very specific reasons, whether we fully understand them or not. So I'm just telling you from what I've seen speaking with you, I believe from what others will see, is you're doing the right thing because you're also pursuing a passion. So to that, what are you currently working on now when it comes to data and it comes to sports?
Yeah, so just a quick start. I did lie a little bit. I was lucky. I landed a contracting job for 6 months. So I do have work, but it's not necessarily my dream, which I knew my first job wouldn't be my dream, but it is something. So it's a good start. It'll be a nice resume builder and something to hopefully be a launching pad. But yeah, right now, I haven't had as much time as I used to do these passion projects just because now I am expected to report to someone and do some things for a company.
Yeah. Yeah, yes, and if your manager or employer is listening, you do work full time.
Yes, no, I definitely do
We're
exact.
yeah, we're doing this in the extra time.
Yeah, yeah.
We're doing
So
this in the extra time between. And just on that too, like you were mentioning it before we started, like you work with people from around the world. So that
yep.
global professional experience also telling you, because I went through it, I wanted it early on, will go a long way because you're going to meet people from different backgrounds, different experiences, and that's just going to help you in terms of your perspective. But I'll reframe then. The projects that you have been working on, that you spent a ton of time on, that you did as in terms of like creating a portfolio, let's speak to those. So which do you want to talk about first?
Yeah, so I can kind of lay the scene on how it started, and I can go into what my first one was and what I would say is my main one is I graduated in May, and I didn't have anything lined up, and I was sitting on my butt in the summer, and my girlfriend is getting her doctorate degree, so she was gone all summer. So I was just bored and I had nothing to do. So I was like, let's just play around, and it's something, it will be on the resume. I made a whole website based off of it. I have a couple projects on it, but I was just curious and wanted to play around with data. So that takes me to my first model, which I gave it a fun little name. It's called the KISS model, or more specifically KISS, which is it's an acronym. It's supposed to be keep it simple, stupid. It's focused on fantasy football. And the whole premise of it and background of it was every year at the start of a fantasy football season, you see, all those memes and not to, profile anyone, but it's usually the girlfriend drafting her team and and I say it in here and now it's different and I refuse to believe it's different, but it used to be the girlfriend taking Tom Brady with the first pick because it's Tom Brady. He's the best player in the NFL. He's debatably, well, I believe the greatest player of all time. He's on what used to be the best team in the NFL. He's going to win every year. So of course you take him first. Like if you have the first pick out of any football player, you take Tom Brady. Now maybe it's Patrick Mahomes, but we won't talk about that.
Right.
So that's what it came from, is this idea of, sure, that's to an extreme, but is there something in the idea of that, of just take the best players on the best teams and you're probably going to do pretty good. So that's kind of where the whole idea came from. And so where I went with that is, I believe, this isn't betting advice or anything, I believe that the Vegas sports books know more than any of us combined. If you think you know more than them, you don't. So my idea for this study was to take previous years of the preseason win totals that Vegas sets. So, if they set the Patriots at 6.5 wins, over or under. So I took that and I matched it and plotted it with fantasy production. And I was just curious to see if, year over year, if players that perform well and are finishing RB1, RB2, are they traditionally on teams that win X number of games? So that's where the whole idea came from. And that was my big project that took me the most time. I put the most effort into it. And so, yeah, that's the first one.
And so we mentioned Vegas, and I just want to comment there. Many folks associate Vegas with, like you said, sports gambling industry or just gambling in general. I associate it with really good food, just for what it's worth. Though, to be more serious and to the point of the topic, when it comes to, again, we'll call it air quotes Vegas, like you said, they know things or they know more information than others do, right? So typically we'll call that, or that's commonly referred to as information asymmetry, right? They know things that the general public doesn't. Now, why is that? They could have better models, better people, they have more historical data to analyze. But some of this, actually, much of it is publicly available now, right? I'm sure that was one of the sources that you used, is what is the publicly available data you can access to build out these models. At the same time, and I mentioned this on episode 3, actually probably every episode at some point, the context matters. And then biases matter, because they're getting information from all places. In the sports world, especially when it comes to storytelling and reporting, you have the idea of sources. Some are named, most are not, right? Most are unnamed confidential sources. And as I spoke about in episode 3 with Ben from Polish Puck, he said, you have to understand the context of where the information is coming from to know what to do with it. And he gave one example where he might be speaking with a coach who's like, oh, this player A is great. They hustle hard. They have great stats. They're amazing. And then you talk to their teammate, who we'll call player B, and they're like, that player A is a bum. They don't try. They're not a good teammate. And what I commented on with Ben, or to Ben, was both could be true, right? Yeah. Two things can be true at once. And so in terms of you creating your keep it simple stupid or keep it stupid simple model, KISS, which as an aside is a framework also used in sales and some other areas. Yeah. And it's one that's universally just great.
Yeah, no, I didn't make it up.
Yeah, of course, yes.
I know. Yeah.
Yeah. But though your naming of it is very apt because you started from a place of it being simple. I'll tie this framework or thinking to the first episode with Darcy Norman, because he spoke to supply chain managing human performance, right? Where he talked about planning, periodization, and overall talking about systems. In operations management, which is, I guess, adjacent to supply chain management, you have this notion which is you cannot scale an inefficient system or inefficient process. I believe, and I'm way removed from this in terms of doing the actual modeling, though I did in undergrad and grad school. From your point of view, does that sort of thinking also apply to creating predictive models that you want to keep it simple first because if it's inefficient or clunky or is slanted in terms of bias, that if you just add to it, it's not necessarily going to get better. It could get worse. Like, have you had much experience with that? And can you just speak to that a little bit from your experience in this context of the work that you've done?
Yeah, so I definitely think for sure that, trying to jump too deep in at first can definitely be, a pain, because at the end of the day, if you have all these different variables trying to predict one thing at once and you're getting inaccurate results, it's going to be a lot harder to dictate what is causing that inaccurate result if you have 5 different factors going into it. So for me, it was just keeping it simple. My variables were, so I did it based off the past 3 years of data, because obviously I couldn't do it on this year because this year hasn't happened yet. So it was taking final fantasy scores, like last year, if Josh Allen scored 350 points, like that was his number. And then I took that number, I took the preseason win total that they had that year. I think the Bills were like 11.5 or something like that. And that's basically all it was at the time. That's how I started. And it was just seeing how are people finishing based off of, or in comparison to their win totals, and just seeing if there was any sort of correlation with that. So it was just keeping it simple. I could have added points per game. I could have added all these extra stats, passing yards, rushing touchdowns. But that's not what it needed. I just wanted to first see, is there a correlation here? And then, yeah, I felt like it worked well.
And then to be clear, from my perspective and for the audience, you use this kind of predictive modeling for your draft.
Yes. So and I did have a takeaway from it with my draft. And the whole idea is, I'm sure we'll get a little bit deeper into it. The whole idea with the model is, for the most part, it is good to just draft the best players on the best teams. And that might not even be some profounding output, because at the end of the day, the best players on the best teams usually are just the best players and get drafted the highest. But there is a deeper value to that I'll get into later. But for now, I took it into my draft. I was like, here we go. And then my first pick was Malik Neighbors on the Giants, the Giants projected like 4.5 wins this year. And then my second pick was Devon A-Chain on the Dolphins, who they're projected like 6.5. So, I like to quote Mike Tyson with, everyone has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. And then once Derrick Henry was off the board, I was like, here we go. So I just went off the cuff, and this is where I ended up. But so I did have the plan to do it.
Stuff happens. Yes. Yeah. Things change. Stuff happens. And that actually brought out a question that I was going to ask about, which is often it could be the world of sport, could be the world of data, could be life. Everything is balance. It's about balance. Yep. It's the art and the science, right? So you have, in this case, the data model that you can have a high confidence in. And then there's all these other factors. It could be biases. It could be actions that in this situation, actions that other participants in the draft take that throw you off.
Yep.
And it's kind of similar, all connected to the second episode with Jacob. When he was playing tennis at Michigan, he spoke to all the analytics that was added around his game from the staff in college that he didn't have in high school. I believe it was called Tennis Analytics. Again, also very on point, apt name for a program. And what he just spoke to was, when you're playing, you can have a plan going into the match. And tennis is, mano y mano, one-on-one, unless you're playing doubles. So let's keep it simple as like straight up singles tennis match. And he said that like, you're not playing the program. You're playing a person, so you have to react and adjust. And that's similar here. Like you said, you had a plan going into it. Someone takes Derrick Henry off the board, and then you have to adjust. So can you just speak to that just, again, a little more in terms of more your point of view on this notion of balancing the art and the science? Or are you just in the outside of this draft? Or I'll ask this way, like outside of that example you gave of this specific draft, are you more generally balanced with art and science? Or are you one of these individuals that it's like, no, it's the data and only the data, and that's it?
Yeah, so I would definitely say more balanced. I think balance is so crucial in analytics because I wrote it and I do a little write-up for all my projects I do on this website for anyone who is willing to read it, and I appreciate anyone who would.
Oh, pause. Sorry, pause. Please tell us what is the website so that the audience can hear it and then I can add it to the show notes.
Yeah, so it's a Google site. I always forget. Google Sites does a weird version of the URL. It should just be Jason's analytics portfolio. I'll send you the link.
Yes, we'll do that. We'll move on.
Get that posted somewhere. But
yes, we will. We'll add in the notes. So okay, please proceed.
Yeah. So with balance, so in the write-up, I basically say, and this might be jumping the gun a little bit, like I said, most of the times it is just better to draft players on better teams just because they're going to score more, they're going to move the ball more, it's going to be better for you overall. But I say that in balance, in that I believe the quarterback number is just a little peek into it. Average QB1, so that's top 12, assuming it's a 12-man league. So quarterback 12 to quarterback 1, 61.11% of those players were projected 9 wins or more going into the season by Vegas sportsbooks. So that's great and all, but I say it in the write-up, is that, say the top guys go off the board and you're like, I really want to take a quarterback here, and you're looking at player A, who is a really good quarterback, really young, fast, runs a lot. They're projected 6 wins, but then there's a player that's projected 11 wins that's further down the board, but they're going to be available in 3 rounds. So it would be silly to jump it just because that's what the numbers tell you. Like, there's more value to be had. So I think that's definitely true. And then I even think on a whole is that, I always take offense to, you see it more in football than any other sport, is you see, the old school football guys who are like, get this math out of my face. Football's played on a field, not in a computer, right? And so I'm always like, but there is something to be said, like, true with that is, you see these coaches that lean so heavily into analytics. I think the main one that comes to my mind is Brandon Staley for the Chargers, is that he was so locked into the analytics and it burned him. Like, it just does. And I think you see it I saw a really cool video. It's this company called Snapback Sports. They're like a sports media company, and they go to all these events and they ask questions, and they went to Big Ten Media Day this year. And they were asking a question, I believe it was, you're down 14, you score a touchdown with like 3 minutes left. Do you go for 2 now? Or you're down 15. Do you go for 2 now? Or do you take the extra point, kick it, play defense? You got to go for 2 at some point. Do you do it now or do you do it later? And the analytics books tell you do it now because you have 2 chances at it instead of 1. And then if you don't get it, you know what you're playing for. You know you have to get 2 stops instead of 1, or you need an onside kick. But then Matt Rule, the coach of Nebraska, used to be the coach of the Panthers and some other places. I think Temple was his big stop. He said that, I get that's what the analytics books say, but analytics don't take into account human nature. And that's important in sports, is that if kicking the ball off for your defense when you're down 8 versus down 9 with 3 minutes left to go is a big deal. Because if you're down 9 on defense with 3 minutes left, like, the game's over. It might not be, but it's over. Like, that's tough. Versus if it's down 8, at least your defense, they're flying around. They're saying, we got to get the ball back to the offense. One more stop, 3 and out, get the ball to them. So I think there is a balance because when it comes to sports, there's a massive human element in it. And
Yes.
the numbers don't take into account the human element. As much as I like analytics and believe they're valuable, there's still a human element that needs to be accounted for that the analytics just don't take into account.
I'm with you. I speak with professional teams, college teams, pro athletes, college athletes, now more regularly. And that's a common theme is it's what's between the ears. It's the mindset. It's what's happening in the moment. And then from a more macro level, it's the game within the game.
Yeah.
Right. And like Jacob said in episode 2, which we were talking about a preview to episode 3, comparing hockey players across leagues in Europe. It's like, how do you even do that? And I thought he was going to go to it to be like, how do you compare a player, say, in like the league in Poland versus Czechia or Slovakia? His perspective more was like, there's 5 players on the ice for the team. Like, it's not one-on-one. There's so many more variables at play. And that's what we speak about with Ben at Polish Puck in episode 3 is, again, you have to find the balance and the context. So really appreciate you digging into that and giving your point of view in terms of what you see in, obviously real life, playing sports yourself. You have some insight into, right, the mindset component of it.
Yep.
Before we get into predictions, where I believe we might disagree, which is fine. Do you have like a favorite analyst that covers fantasy sports?
Yeah. So I have a couple. I would say my true favorite analysts, they run a show for Underdog Fantasy. Their names are, I think it's Josh Harris and Hayden Winks. I believe his last name's Harris. They run an Underdog Fantasy show. It's awesome. I recommend it to anyone. Just look them up on YouTube. I think it's called the Underdog Fantasy Football Show. But another one that I like, and I actually did another project on him. His name's Mike Clay. He works for ESPN. If you've ever played ESPN Fantasy, you know who he is, even if you don't think you know who he is, because he does all the projections for them. And I think he's a good guy to follow. But the project I did on him was, so I mentioned Underdog Fantasy is a daily fantasy platform, but they focus on best ball, which is just a different type of fantasy football where you draft all throughout the summer and then it plays out in the regular season. You don't have to think about it. But the problem with that is they get an ADP, which average draft position, which a lot of people think is very accurate because there's a lot of money played on this platform. The sharpest people draft there because there's a lot of money at stake. If you win the big tournament, I think it's like a $2 million prize. That's going to draw smart people. But the problem with that is there's a lot of groupthink that goes into that, because if the same people are drafting over 3 months and everyone's listening to the same analyst for the most part, a lot of this, every draft for the most part is going to look relatively similar. So I was very curious on how that would stack up to like an analyst and their rankings. When Mike Clay released his first 2025 season projections, I mapped out his rankings versus Underdog's ADPs just to see how it stacked up, where he was high, where he was low, just to see, I found it interesting just to see where the general public is higher versus where he's lower and stuff like that.
Yeah, thanks for that. So shout out Underdog, shout out Mike Clay, go check him out. I will link those also. And before we get into your predictions, there's a component to that I wanted to just briefly touch on, which is what you said around groupthink. So from my perspective and in my experience in the broader data world, this happens a lot of the time. It also happens actually making investment decisions with like VCs, where if a specific name has already invested in a company, others that come on aboard after on the cap table already assume that person did their due diligence and did proper due diligence or even anything. And because of that, they just pile in. And you have this, I don't know what the expression is, that you have this situation where everyone just follows the leader, assuming somebody else did, but it's kind of tied to then tragedy of the commons, where if you assume everybody else did and nobody does, everyone's in trouble. So my takeaway from there is have a point of view, right? One of the things that I still vividly remember from undergrad at Hobart College and grad school at University of Rochester at Simon Business School is, you need to have like a point of view when you develop a hypothesis or hypotheses before creating the models. If you don't, then similar to what Darcy talked about in episode 1, you'll just follow the data and just, my words, not Darcy's, start making stuff up.
Mhm.
Right? You'll be like, okay, that's what we're doing. So thanks for giving those very practical examples from your experience on why you need a point of view, why you should interrogate the data, and why sometimes you have to just adjust as you go. Okay, so before we get to behind the data, what are some of your predictions when it comes to either data analytics or fantasy football or data in sports? I've alluded to AI. That's what you're going to talk about. Again, I think I'm going to disagree to an extent. Though, what are some of the high notes in terms of your predictions of what's going to happen in the coming years?
Yeah, so long story short, I don't think AI is going anywhere. I think it's going to be a large part of our lives, specifically in the data world, moving forward and for the foreseeable future, unless something changes. I think it's too powerful of a tool. It's too accessible. Like it's going to be around for a while. And I think there's good and bad aspects to that. I learned coding right before AI started, so I'm comfortable enough, or before it became mainstream. I'm comfortable enough with code that I can write it without AI, but I've found it makes my life a whole lot easier if I go into a project basically telling that, like, how I work is I have an idea of what I want to accomplish. I know how it should be structured. I just, for lack of a better term, don't care to write it from scratch. So I tell AI, this is the deal. Like, this is what I want. This is the structure. Use these libraries, use this loop, use like whatever. I basically tell it exactly what I want and then it spits it out at me. And that's usually what I go with. And then, I can go through and edit it. But yeah, I mean, if you look at anything on social media right now, all these software engineering students, everyone, they're all talking about, you'd be kind of an idiot not to use it at this point in terms of coding. Obviously, you don't want to blindly follow it because there are the negatives to that. And there's, I don't know if you've heard of it. There's the whole term of like vibe coding right now, which is just, it's not great, but there's a
Yes,
lot
I've
of
heard
people
of.
doing it.
Yep.
So I think it's a mix. I think you still have to understand, and I think this is with AI as a whole. I think there will be jobs that AI take over, but I think for the most part, it will become kind of a companion and take on a lot of the busy work of jobs where you still are going to have to be knowledgeable about what you're doing, but you're going to have AI next to you to kind of do like the grunt work for you, if that makes sense. That's how I envision the future.
It does. So actually, I hate to say it, it's hard to take a contrarian view. I do generally agree. When I was in school and in most of my professional career, these tools, we'll call them, weren't as accessible to allow for mass adoption. And I believe they still have a long way to go for very specific use cases because generally when people speak to AI, they mean generative AI or Gen
Yep.
AI. They don't, generally, people don't have a point of view on what the outcome should be or what the output should be, and they blindly follow. And a challenge currently with the large language models, which many of the tools use, and they're using the same ones, they can hallucinate, which we don't need to get into the technical nuance and detail of that, though. Mike P's words, to keep it simple, it just makes stuff up. It
Yeah.
tells you stuff that isn't there. So that's advice I would give to, well, I have two pieces of advice to what you spoke to. And this could be anyone in any industry, any stage of their career, is start at least trying out some of these tools and don't blindly follow it. Like,
Yeah.
have a point of view, have a hypothesis, especially if you've been in an industry for quite some time where you know and understand the problem very deeply. You can very much use it to accelerate some of your air quotes busy work. And that's where I've lately found the tools as a companion to help me. For example, instead of creating a Word doc from scratch, or like a checklist of customer onboarding or what needs to happen within a specific process or system, what I specifically did was had a virtual call with one of my colleagues. We spoke about it like verbally. We just talked through what are the steps that need to be done, had the call recorded, took the transcript and the video into one of these tools and asked the tool to look at only those sources, nothing else, and then cite where in the document and the video pulled it from so we could double check to create the checklist in written form. And then we adapted it into a table to adjust as we needed it. And so that ended up taking us maybe a 30-minute call, maybe a couple seconds of processing, and then some time for us to refine it. So I took a pass, send it to them, and I said, hey, take a look, and then we're done. So that would normally be, though important work, busy work to start it from scratch. So I'm with you in terms of those specific use cases. It is useful. It's not going anywhere. And with like all this data everywhere, like I said, you're not leaving the data space, whether you like it or not, because there is data everywhere. Jason, there are software companies out there or companies out there who state we are a software company or we are SaaS or we are AI. No, they are data companies. They just don't know it yet. And I'm not going to use the overused expression of data is the new oil because, people say this like they say that now in the past couple of years as if it's a new thing. My big boss back in the day, Michael, who said I wasn't leaving the industry, he used that in a slide in like 2013, talking about why that data company creates so much value in the B2B space. And he wasn't even representing it as his own or a new thing. It was just a way to frame it. So I wanted to add that from my experience to tie to what you're sharing. Because again, I'm not that much older than you, though in terms of our educational background and professional background, we're at different stages. So it's nice to, for me, juxtapose, and I think for others to juxtapose. Before we get into behind the data, is there any advice you have for current students who are maybe slightly before you in terms of the stage or steps that you can offer to them based on your experience to help them out?
Yeah, like for me, it was just to just do it. Like, who cares? I mean, regardless of how busy your social life is at a college or at a high school, wherever you are in life, especially in college. So this is specifically for that because this is when I did this, or well, for me, it was just after. But you have a ton of free time in college. Like you spend more time sitting doing nothing than anything else.
Yes.
So just do it. Like, there's no harm. You're working for yourself. There's no deadlines. There's nothing like that. There's no pressure. So if you're interested in something and want to do it, there's a ton of free data out there. For me, I didn't pay for anything for any of this. It's all just free stuff that I either copy and pasted off a website or downloaded a CSV file. So like for me, I always was like, oh, I want to do this. And then I would never do it. And then finally, one day I was like, just do it. And I did it. And I had a good time. And now I get to talk about it. So that's cool. So
yeah, that's the thing. You learn by doing. I learned by doing. In the past, my pattern would be spend too much time thinking, analyzing. And I realized once I just start doing, not caring so much about what the outcome is it perfect, but refining the process, refining the craft, I find like you learn as you go. And this gets easier. And I'll say that, again, I've referred to Ben in episode 3 a couple of times with Polish Puck. He had similar advice for people because he started a website about Polish ice hockey in English, which I think most of the world is not so interested in. I am highly interested. For those who haven't seen that episode, you will understand why. But he had similar advice to you. It's just like, just do it. If you have it as an interest, these are then my words. The worst that can happen is you learn something, right? It's you learn something and then you can apply it to other situations. And then, I mean, he got a job from that website with the Detroit Red Wings. Yeah. And I said similar to Takeda, who's at Colorado right now, in episode 4, that I'll say to you, it's like the college experience. Again, I was a good student, though I wasn't doing like 90%, maybe 99% of, and I'm not being hyperbolic, of the things that people like Takeda are doing, people like you are doing. It's very impressive to me. It really is. So my advice and nudge is like, just don't stop. I mean, you can tell from my perspective, you're super interested in this. You're super knowledgeable. We didn't even go into so much of the detail either. So again, I'll link the website for your portfolio in the notes and people can check that out and connect with you on LinkedIn if they want. But I just wanted to finish with that before we go into behind the data. So we started talking about you in terms of your background, in terms of who you are. And now we're going to finish with you. And this will be a little more rapid fire. I guess unless you say something that I want to mention something about it, and every episode prior I do. So let's go ahead. So I'll ask you the same 4 questions I've asked every other guest, probably in the same order because I am a creature of habit. So is there a place that is close to your heart or near and dear to you? And if you want to share why?
Yeah. So for me, I mean, obviously I'm young, so I have kind of a more limited selection, but it's Swampscott, Massachusetts. It's where I was born and raised. Most of you listening probably have no idea what it is. It's a small ocean town. It's between Lynn and Salem and Marblehead. Like it's all around there, but it's a tiny town. It's got like 8 beaches. But Swampscott as a whole will always be just held in my heart. But more specifically, it's called Phillips Park. It's
Okay.
just a big green space. There's a basketball court that I can't even imagine how many hours I've spent on with my friends in the summer just playing basketball. There's 3 baseball fields or even more. There's a bunch of soccer fields, a bunch of green space. It's where our like football field is for football games. So I've spent so much time at that park. And it's just every time I drive by it, I smile because I think I got to play just a quick thing. I have a feeling we won't be able to get off of it quickly. I got to play against Adam Sandler in basketball at that court. So that's
Whoa.
pretty cool. Yeah. He was filming Grown Ups too. There's a little tidbit. Grown Ups 2 both have scenes filmed in Swampscott. So I've met him a couple times because when he was here, we'd go hang out and we'd find him. But one night I was going to play basketball. It was around sunset. My friends called me and they're like, "Are you coming?" And I was like, "I'm getting in my car. Like, why is it such a rush?" And they're like, "Adam Sandler just showed up. Like, get down here right now." And so I got to play against him, which he was awesome. He is as good as everyone tells you he is in every aspect. He's the nicest guy. He's the funniest guy. I got to play against him, so I wasn't on his team, but we were covering each other. So that was pretty cool.
Wow.
Um, my first drive, I got to shoot an open three. He fouled me, but I swallowed the whistle. I couldn't call it on him because what am I a senior in high school or junior in high school at the time? What am I gonna do? That's not right. So
That's
that was cool.
awesome.
Yeah, so
That
that place
that
will always just it's
Oh
special to me.
wow. I would never have guessed that we
Yeah.
would get
Yeah,
an Adam Sandler reference here.
it was a crazy experience. And he is just like hilarious, like funny guy, nice guy.
That's amazing.
Yes.
Moving on to food. Is there a favorite meal you have or comfort food that's either homemade or from a restaurant?
Yeah, so it's more of like a comfort thing. People that live on the North Shore will probably know what I'm talking about. It's a cult favorite. It's called Bagel World, but there's I think 4 or 5 locations. It's the best. I've never had a better bagel than there. And it's still cheap. Like it's still not expensive. I just get like a French toast bagel toast with butter. I think it's like $3 for that. It's like compared to like where we're at in the world, like it's still pretty affordable. Me and my girlfriend go there at least once a week, mostly on Sunday mornings before football starts. So it's a cult favorite on the North Shore. I see TikToks about it all the time. So
Oh wow. I'm gonna have to come up there and check this place
yeah,
out. I
no,
mean,
it's
in
good.
today's
Yeah, yeah, it's worth it. Yeah, I promise. I think there's 4 locations. There's one
all
in
right.
Salem, which is the one I go to. So
All right, sweet. Thank you for that. Is there a song that puts you in a mood or gets you pumped up, or maybe you listen to while you're coding or doing your work? And what is it?
yeah, so my music taste has changed so much since high school. When I was in high school and playing sports, it was a lot of rap and hip hop.
Same.
I was a massive Kanye West fan. That's really what got me going. Power, All Falls Down, like anything Kanye. I was rocking out to before basketball games, before soccer games. Now it's changed a little bit. It's mostly my girlfriend's not fault, but doing. I've become more of a country fan now, so now it's a lot of Morgan Wallen, Luke Combs. I really like Post. I've always liked Post Malone. That's probably the earliest like hype up song I can remember is White Iverson. That's probably the earliest like that was the song that got me going. But yeah, now it's a lot of more country, more relatable.
Well, some of our, I guess, tastes and maybe preferences can change over time for very specific reasons. Yeah, I've seen Morgan Wallen and Luke Combs live. Post Malone, not yet, but I'm
Yeah.
told from my cousin he's also a really nice guy. Okay, Jason, last but not least, is there a book that you've read in the last year or two that has had an impact on you and or taught you a lesson and you want to pass on that book for others to check out?
Yeah, so reading is definitely not my thing. I've never been a big reader, but my dad did buy me a book and I did read it because I mostly felt bad that he spent money on it and wanted me to read it, but also because I was interested. I forget exactly what it's called. It's right behind me. It's called The Motley Fool Investment Guide. As I was approaching college graduation, I feel so old every time I say it, but I was like, my interest started to shift from what I was doing to, stock market, stuff like that. And I just didn't really know what it was. And I've watched some videos, but I couldn't really get it. So, like I said, I had a lot of downtime in school. So I had that book at school. I'd read a chapter a morning, and now I invest a good amount of money. So I do. If people want to get into it, like, it was a good intro for me. They do a good job. It's very conversational. It's not very it's not super technical. It made a lot of sense to me, and I had no experience going in. So.
Awesome. Those are always the best when it's very simple. And then,
Yeah.
especially if you're not a reader, don't like reading so much, that it's one that you can then get through and then use for very practical reasons.
Yeah.
So thank you for those, Jason. And thank you again for taking the time. This has been a lot of fun.
Yeah. Thank you for having me. This is a great time.
Anytime.